What if Issei trained by Ophis and marry her? The last thing Issei Hayato remembered, clearly and in sequence, was the sky. Not a dramatic sky, not the kind that appears in the final moments of stories, burning orange and meaningful. Just the ordinary coast sky at early evening, that particular shade of blue-gray that happened when the day had used up most of its color and was coasting toward dark. He had been looking at it because he had been on his back, which was where the impact had put him, and the sky was what was available to look at while he processed whether he was about to die. The answer had appeared to be, probably, the stray devil, if it could still be called that, if something that had absorbed 4 other stray devils and a cursed artifact in a 3-day rampage could still be contained by a term that modest, had hit him with enough force to separate him from the rest of the peerage by approximately 200 meters and one significant wall. He had felt the boosted gear responding, the familiar surge, the doubling, but something in the impact had disrupted the sequence, and for 3 seconds that felt considerably longer. He had been simply Issei Hayato, 17 years old, lying in rubble looking at an evening sky. He had thought, with the mild clarity that extreme situations sometimes produced, I should get up. He had not gotten up, and then the sky had changed, not dramatically. Not with light or sound or any of the sensory drama he associated with supernatural events. It had simply shifted, the way the image shifts when you press on your closed eyes, a subtle wrongness in the texture of reality. And then it was not the coast sky anymore. It was not any sky anymore. It was the dimensional gap. The dimensional gap was not what anyone who had not been there could accurately imagine. And Issei spent the first several minutes of consciousness in it discovering that everything he had been told was technically accurate, and completely insufficient. It was described as a space between dimensions, which was true, and which conveyed approximately nothing of what it actually felt like to be in it. It was described as dark, also true, but the darkness was not the darkness of a room with the lights off. It was the darkness of a space that had never needed light because light was a concept developed by things that lived inside dimensions, and this was outside them. It was, Issei thought, enormous in a way that the word enormous could not contain. It was enormous the way the concept of infinity was enormous, not more of something, but a different category of thing entirely. He was lying on something that was not quite ground. He was breathing, which surprised him, because he had not been certain that breathing would be available. He was alive. This surprised him slightly less, because dying seemed like it would have been more conclusive. He sat up slowly, taking inventory. The boosted gear was active. He could feel it, the warm presence of it, and Drake's attention behind it, watchful and unusually quiet. His body had been through several unpleasant things in the last 10 minutes, and had opinions about several of them, but nothing was broken in any way that would prevent function. He was, in the assessment of someone who had learned to triage his own damage, operational. He looked around. The dimensional gap looked back at him. It was not empty. He had expected empty, had expected the void that the name implied. It was not that. It was full, densely full, of something that didn't have a name in any language he spoke, a presence that was not light and not darkness and not matter, that existed at a register his senses could detect but not classify. It moved slowly, the way very deep ocean water moves, with the weight of something that has been moving for longer than it can remember. You are awake, said a voice. Issei turned. She was standing, or doing the thing that, in this space, served the function of standing, approximately 10 meters from him, and she was looking at him with eyes that were ancient in a way that made every other old thing he had ever encountered seem recent. Ophis, the infinite dragon god. He had seen her before. Brief encounters, context-heavy and dangerous, the kind of meetings where you are too busy surviving to observe. He had not, in those meetings, had the opportunity to simply look at her, to register her as a presence rather than a threat level. She was, the word that occurred to him was still. Not motionless, though she was that too. Still in the deeper sense, the sense of something that had found its natural state, and required no effort to remain in it. The way a mountain is still, not because it isn't powerful, but because its power doesn't need expression. She was watching him with the precise, unhurried attention of something that was used to having all the time it could ever need. Yes, Issei said, because that seemed like the appropriate response to you are awake. Ophis looked at him. He looked at her. Where is the stray devil? He asked. Gone, she said. The word was simple and complete, and he understood from the delivery that gone was not a recoverable condition. Did you? Yes. He processed this. Why? Ophis was quiet for a moment. Not hesitation, he registered, because hesitation implied uncertainty, and her stillness was not uncertain. More like the pause of someone accessing a calculation that was longer than usual. It was in the way, she said. Issei looked at her. Of what? He asked. Another pause of the same quality. Of bringing you here, she said. He sat with that. Partner, Drake said quietly, inside his mind. I know, Issei said very softly. Your partner is surprised, Ophis said. She had heard, or perceived, or experienced in whatever way she perceived things, the exchange. He did not expect me to act directly. Are you going to tell me why you did? Issei asked. I am considering how to answer accurately, she said. I do not speak often. The words are sometimes imprecise. Something about this caught in Issei's chest in a way he didn't immediately analyze. The image of something this powerful, this ancient, this absolute, trying to find accurate words. He had expected danger. He had expected strategy. He had not expected care about precision. Take your time, he said. She looked at him again. I have been observing you, she said. For some time. This is not unusual. I observe many things. The dimensional gap touches all dimensions. Observation is natural. A pause. But most things I observe and move past. They are comprehensible. Their patterns are known. They do not produce. She paused. I do not have a clean word. Curiosity? Issei offered. She considered this. Perhaps. I am not certain I have experienced it before, so I cannot confirm the label. But something directs my attention to you. Repeatedly, despite having no strategic reason for the attention. Issei was quiet for a moment. That's curiosity, he said. You sound certain. I'm curious about things all the time. It feels like being pulled towards something without being able to explain why. He paused. Usually for me it's significantly less dignified than how you're describing it. Something shifted in her expression. Not a smile, not quite. Something that occupied the space where a smile might eventually be, if it had been given more time. I want to train you, she said. The sentence landed in the dimensional gap with the weight of something that had been decided before it was spoken. Issei looked at her steadily. Why? He said. I do not know completely, she said. I know that your potential is significant. I know that the boosted gears partner is the only entity in existence with the theoretical capacity to approach my power level. Not equal it, but approach it, which is notable. I know that training you would be useful strategically. She paused. I also know that those are accurate reasons that are not the complete reason. What's the rest of it? The observation, she said. The attention that moves toward you without strategic justification. I find that I want to be near it. Near you. She said this with the same flat precision she had said everything else, and it was somehow more affecting for the lack of performance. I am not able to justify this more completely than that. Issei breathed in the dimensional gap's strange non-air. He thought about what he knew about Ophis. The leader of the Cows Brigade, except not really. The Cows Brigade had used her as a figurehead and a power source, which was its own kind of thing. The infinite dragon god. Older than history. Dwelling in the dimensional gap since before most of the supernatural world had developed the concept of dwelling. Wanting only one thing, in all her infinite existence, silence. Returned to the gap. Stillness. Alone, he realized, for longer than his mind could actually process. Okay, he said. Ophis looked at him. Okay, she repeated. I'll train with you. He met her eyes, those ancient, uncategorizable eyes, without looking away. But I have a condition. She waited. Honesty, he said. Whatever's happening, whatever you want to train me for, whatever the rest of that reason is that you don't know completely yet, you tell me when you figure it out. I've had enough of people being strategic with me. He paused. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm saying I've learned to ask for honesty upfront so we both know it's the ground we're standing on. Another of those pauses that had depth to them. I am not accustomed to being asked for things, Ophis said. I am accustomed to being negotiated with. Manipulated. Used. She paused. This is different. Is it a problem? No, she said. And then, with the careful precision of something that did not make statements it wasn't certain of. It is the opposite of a problem. I simply do not have a clean word for what it is. That's okay, Issei said. We have time to find it. She gave him a space. He didn't know what to call it exactly. It was not a room, because the dimensional gap did not have rooms in the architectural sense. But there was an area that she had, organized, perhaps, or designated, or willed into a particular quality of existence, that was separate from the larger vastness. It had the suggestion of walls. It had the functional equivalent of a floor. It had, and possibly, something that produced the quality of warmth. Did you make this? He asked, looking around. Yes, Ophis said. When? Recently. A pause. After I began observing you. I found I was preparing a space without having formally decided to do so. Issei looked at her. That's a very you way of describing it, he said. She tilted her head very slightly. How do you know what a very me way is? We have not spoken at length before. You're very precise, he said. You say exactly what's true and nothing extra. So when something happens that doesn't fit a clean category, you describe it without a category instead of forcing it into one. He paused. That's honest. I like it. She looked at him for a long moment. You observe accurately, she said. I observe a lot, he said. People talk around me sometimes without realizing I'm paying attention. She considered this. This is useful. It's also sometimes the opposite of useful. He sat down on what served as the floor. Can I ask you something? You will ask regardless, she said. Not critically. Accurately. Fair. When was the last time someone just talked to you? Not negotiated. Not requested power. Just talked. Another deep pause. I am not certain I can calculate that, she said. The concept of someone wanting simply to speak with me, not to gain something, is... She seemed to be searching for a word again. Unfamiliar. Issei nodded slowly. He thought about what it meant to be unfamiliar with basic companionship. He had experienced loneliness, the specific loneliness of adolescence, of feeling too much and not having the vocabulary for it, of caring loudly in a world that sometimes rewarded quieter registers. But his loneliness had been the loneliness of someone in a crowd who hadn't found their people yet. Hers was. He stopped that thought before he followed it further, because following it further would take him somewhere that made her absence of loneliness almost unbearable to think about. Well, he said. We're talking now. She looked at him. Yes, she said. We are. Drake waited until Ophis had left the immediate space, moving with that absolute silence that was its own kind of announcement, before speaking. Partner, he said, in the careful tone he reserved for conversations he considered significant. Are you aware of what you have agreed to? Training with the most powerful dragon god in existence, Issei said. In the dimensional gap. With honesty as the foundational agreement. Yes. Do you understand the implications of the last part? That I said what I meant and she agreed to it. That she agreed to it, Drake said, is the part that I am processing. Ophis does not agree to things. She is not a being who enters into agreements with individuals. Factions, occasionally. Strategic arrangements, rarely. But a personal agreement to honesty with a single human. A pause. This has not happened before. I know, Issei said. You said it knowing that. Yes. Why? Issei thought about it. Because if she's going to be honest with me about why she brought me here, and she already started being honest, before I even asked, which is notable, then the least I can do is be honest back. And being honest with her means establishing a front. That's the language we're using. He paused. Also because she's lonely. And people who are lonely and honest deserve someone who will be honest back. A long silence from Drake. She is not a person, the dragon said finally. In the technical sense. No, Issei agreed. She's something much larger than a person. That doesn't make the loneliness smaller. Drake was quiet for a while. You are aware, he said, that I know Ophis. Not personally. We have not spoken directly in a very long time. But I know her nature. I know what she is and what she has been. She does not experience things as humans do. She does not experience attachment as humans do. She exists at a register so far above ordinary being that most contact with her is conceptually. Drake, Issei said. Yes. Are you trying to warn me about something specific, or are you just nervous because something unexpected is happening? A pause. The second one, Drake admitted. Mostly the second one. I am not accustomed to unexpected developments in my partner's situations. I prefer to have a framework. Noted. Issei lay back on the something-like floor and looked at the something-like ceiling. I don't have a framework either. I think we might just have to trust that honesty and attention are good starting points. And if they are not sufficient, then we'll find out what else is needed and add that. He paused. That's sort of how everything works. Drake made a sound that was perhaps the dragon equivalent of a sigh, ancient and resonant and resigned in the affectionate way. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow she will begin training. I have no idea what that will look like. I find that I am both concerned and interested, which are not my usual states simultaneously. Welcome to how I feel about everything, all the time, Issei said. This is exhausting. You get used to it. She came back at what Issei's body estimated was morning, though the dimensional gap had no sun and the concept of morning was entirely imported from elsewhere. She stood at the threshold of his space and looked at him in the way she had looked at him before, the complete, unhurried attention, and he had the thought, not for the first time, that being looked at by Ophis was a different experience from being looked at by anyone else. Not uncomfortable. Not invasive. More like being seen clearly. The way you see something when the light is exactly right, when there's no glare and no shadow and the thing is simply what it is. You slept, she said. I did. He sat up. Did you? A pause. I do not require sleep. I know. I was asking if you did anyway. Some people who don't require it still choose it. She considered this. No. I was. Another access pause. Present in the gap. Thinking. About several things. The training structure. The appropriate beginning point. She paused. And the conversation. The one we had. Were you thinking about it or processing it? She looked at him with something that might have been the beginning of a question. You said you don't have words for some things, he said. Thinking about something and processing it are different. Thinking means you keep returning to it because it's interesting. Processing means you're trying to file it into a category. She was quiet for a moment. Both, she said. It resisted filing. Which is unusual. Most things can be filed. A pause. So I kept returning to it. That's thinking, Issei said. Welcome to it. The something like a smile was back, at the edge of her expression. It is inefficient, she said. Very, he agreed. It's also one of the better things. The training began simply. Or rather, it began in a way that appeared simple and was immediately revealed to be nothing of the sort. Ophis stood across from him in the larger clearing space of the gap and said, Feel the pressure of my existence. Issei stood. He felt the pressure of her existence. He had always known, intellectually, that Ophis was powerful in a category-defining way. He had been in her vicinity before without feeling this because she had been contained, he realized now, in those encounters. She had been choosing a level of presence that allowed functioning conversation. Now she was simply present. Not attacking. Not threatening. Just there, at full existence, the way the ocean is there when you stand on the edge of it. His knees wanted to do something different than hold him up. He locked them. The boosted gear flared, defensive, instinctive. Don't, Ophis said. Not with words. He heard it in a way that bypassed the auditory system entirely. Don't defend against it. Don't boost against it. Simply, stand in it, he breathed. This, he recognized, was familiar from a different angle. Tannen had taught him to receive without being moved. This was the same lesson at a scale Tannen's boulders had been a preliminary study for. The pressure of Ophis's full presence was not a physical force, it was an existential one. It pressed against the fact of him, the small specific human fact of him, and asked without words, Are you here? I am here, he said, not with words. She went still in a different way. He stood. 1 minute. 2. 5. At the 7-minute mark, something in the pressure changed. Not lessened. Accepted him. The way water accepts something placed in it, surrounding it without crushing it, finding the shape of the new thing and holding it. He breathed. Drake hummed. Ophis said out loud, Interesting. What? Issei said also out loud, because he had the feeling that the nonverbal communication had been a significant effort. You did not collapse. She paused. No one has stood in full contact with my presence for that duration without collapse or aggressive response. Another pause. Not in my memory, which is extensive. How extensive? Longer than the current configuration of this universe. Issei considered this. And no one has ever just stood in it. No. Why not? Because most things experience overwhelming power as something to be fought or fled from. She looked at him with those eyes. You experienced it as something to be present in. That's what you asked me to do, he said. Yes, she said. It is the first time anyone has been capable of doing what I asked. The dimensional gap moved around them, slow and deep. What does that mean? Issei asked. For the training? It means, Ophis said, that we can begin the real training. What you just did was the entry requirement. She paused. Most potential students fail it immediately. Issei looked at her. You've tried to train others before? No, she said. But I have known, in the abstract way that one knows things from long observation, what the entry requirement would be. A pause. I did not expect you to meet it on the first day. I had a good teacher, Issei said. Someone taught me that receiving without being moved is its own kind of power. Ophis looked at him. Who? She asked. A dragon, he said. Something shifted in her eyes. Tannin. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment. He taught you well, she said. Not in the tone of paying a compliment. In the tone of recording an accurate observation. He did, Issei agreed. Then what I teach you will build on a strong foundation, she said. She turned, moving through the gap with that absolute fluid silence. Rest. Tomorrow we go further. Ophis, he said. She stopped. Thank you, he said. For pulling me out of that fight. For, whatever this is. She stood with her back to him for a moment. I told you, she said. It was in the way. I know what you said, he said. I also know that wasn't the complete reason. You told me that too. A long pause. Yes, she said. It was not the complete reason. She moved into the gap, and the gap received her, and she was simply present in it, the way she was always present in it. And he stood in her space and felt the warmth that she had prepared without formally deciding to, and looked at the something-like ceiling, and let himself simply exist in this strange and enormous new thing. Partner, Drake said. Yeah, I spoke to her. Briefly. While you were standing in the pressure. A pause. She asked me if you were always like this. Like what? She said, and this is a direct quote, from a being who chooses her words with considerable care. Does he always look at things as if they are worth seeing? Issei was quiet. What did you say? I said yes, Drake replied. It is the most accurate description of you I have ever encountered. The gap moved around them. Issei closed his eyes. He was, he realized, not afraid. He was in the most powerful and ancient place in existence, with the most powerful being in existence, with no faction and no plan and no safety net, and he was not afraid. He was curious. Pulled towards something he couldn't name yet, the way curiosity pulled. Like finding a door in a place you thought you knew completely, and reaching for the handle not because you were certain about what was on the other side but because the reaching was its own answer. He thought about Ophis standing in the gap, thinking about a conversation because it resisted filing. He thought, I know how that feels. He fell asleep in the dimensional gap, in the warmth she had prepared without deciding to, and outside in the infinite darkness. Something ancient and enormous sat and thought about a conversation and did not file it away. The second day began with Ophis standing in his space before he was fully awake. Issei registered her presence before he registered anything else, before the something-like ceiling, before the residual ache of yesterday's training, before the ambient strangeness of existing in the dimensional gap. Her presence was simply that distinct. Not threatening. Not even particularly loud, in the existential sense. Just, unmistakably there, the way a mountain is unmistakably there even when you're not looking at it. He opened his eyes. She was standing at what he had come to think of as the threshold, the boundary between his designated space and the larger gap, looking at him with that complete unhurried attention. You were dreaming, she said. People usually are, when they're asleep. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. Did you watch me sleep? A pause that had something almost careful in it. I was present in the gap. Your space is part of the gap. I was aware of you. That's a diplomatic answer. It is an accurate answer. It's an accurate answer that is also diplomatic, Issei said, not unkindly. What were you aware of specifically? She considered this with the patience of something that had never needed to rush an answer. That you were present. That your presence is different when you are unconscious. Less organized. More. She paused. The word that occurs to me is open. Though I am not certain it is precisely correct. Issei looked at her. You were watching to see what I'm like when I'm not performing, he said. You do not perform, she said. That is one of the things that produces the attention. Everyone performs a little, he said. Even unconsciously. It's just smaller when you're asleep. She absorbed this. Then yes. I was observing the smaller version. He was quiet for a moment, considering whether this bothered him. He ran an honest internal check and found that it did not, which itself was notable. Being watched while sleeping should have felt like an intrusion. Instead it felt like attention paid carefully. Which was different. What did you find? He asked. Another of her deep pauses. That the open version and the awake version are the same direction, she said. Some beings are entirely different when unguarded. You are simply more of what you already are. Issei processed this. Is that good? He asked. It is consistent, she said. For me, consistency is the highest reliability. She paused. In my experience, most things are consistent only in how they change when they believe no one is watching. He thought about what it meant to have spent an existence long enough to build that particular conclusion. Not everyone is like that, he said. No, she agreed. You are demonstrating that. He got up, found the camp stove she had apparently materialized in his space at some point. It was simply there, where it had not been, and made tea without asking whether this was appropriate. It felt appropriate. The dimensional gap, he was discovering, had its own logic, and part of that logic was that practical actions had weight here. Do you want some? He asked. Ophis looked at the camp stove, and then at him. I do not require. I know you don't require it, he said. That's not what I asked? A pause. I do not know if I want it, she said. I have not considered wanting tea before. Consider it now, he said. No rush. He made his own cup and sat on his rock and waited. She stood at the threshold for a moment longer, and then, with the quality of someone making a decision they have not made before, she came fully into the space and sat, not on a rock, but in the way she sat, which was somewhere between sitting and simply choosing a position to exist in, folded into herself with that uncanny stillness. He poured a second cup and set it near her. She looked at it. She picked it up, with hands that moved with precision so complete it looked effortless, and held it the way someone holds something they are experiencing for the first time, fully, attending to the temperature and weight of it. She drank a small amount. She was quiet for a moment. It is average, she said. Issei laughed, a genuine one, surprised out of him. Drake says the same thing? It is objectively average, Drake confirmed. I don't know why you keep making it. Because I make it myself and it's mine, Issei said to both of them. Ophis looked at him over the cup. Something in her expression had shifted, not warmed, exactly, because warmth implied a temperature change and she was more like, deepened, as if a layer of something had settled further down. That is a sufficient reason, she said. They drank average tea in the dimensional gap, in the silence that Ophis had lived in for longer than history, and Issei found that the silence with her was a different quality of silence than the silence without her. Not because she filled it, she didn't, she was constitutionally incapable of filling a silence, she was silence's natural inhabitant, but because a silence shared is structurally different from a silence alone, regardless of how quiet both parties are. He thought she probably didn't know that yet. He thought she might be starting to. Today, Ophis said, when the tea was finished, we work on language. Issei had been expecting physical training, more pressure, more standing in vastness, another entry requirement of some kind. Language was not what he had anticipated. Dragon language? He asked. The register beneath language, she said. What dragons actually communicate? Not the words. The words are a translation for beings who require words. The actual communication is conceptual. Dimensional. It does not move through sound. She paused. Your partner uses it with you, occasionally, without being aware of it. When he communicates things that are not quite words. That is accurate, Drake said, with the mild surprise of someone being told something true about themselves that they hadn't consciously identified. How do you teach something that doesn't move through sound? Issei asked. You do not teach it, Ophis said. You cannot. It cannot be instructed. It can only be experienced until recognition occurs. She set down her cup with the same precise attention she gave everything. I will communicate something to you in the actual register. You will sit with it until you understand what was communicated. The first time will be slow. The second will be less slow. What if I don't understand it? Then we sit until you do, she said. I have time. He thought about what it meant for I have time to be stated by something that had existed since before the current universe's configuration. Okay, he said. Go ahead. Ophis looked at him, and then she communicated something. He felt it before he processed it. The way you feel a change in air pressure before you understand that weather is happening. It moved through him at a register that bypassed every sense he had and arrived somewhere deeper, somewhere that didn't have a name in his personal anatomy, and sat there with the patience of something that was not in a hurry. He sat with it. His first attempt at interpretation was entirely wrong. He reached for it with language, tried to translate it into words, and it resisted the way a three-dimensional object resists being described in two dimensions. Technically possible, but something essential is lost. He let go of language. He sat with it without trying to translate. He stayed in it. Stayed with the pure experience of it, the way you stay with music before you start analyzing it, before your brain starts categorizing rhythm and melody and structure. Just the thing itself. Slowly, the way light comes up at dawn, not a switch, but a gradual revelation, he understood. It was not a word. It was not a sentence. It was a state. A complete state, communicated whole. The feeling of existing alone for so long that alone had stopped being a description and had become a definition. The feeling of looking at the dimensional gap and finding it beautiful and finding that beauty insufficient because beauty meant nothing if it was only yours. The feeling of observing something, someone, and feeling the observation change you, and not having a category for what that change was, and holding it carefully because it was new and new things were, in an existence as long as hers, extraordinarily rare. He opened his eyes. He hadn't realized he'd closed them. Ophis was watching him. He looked at her, and he did not say I understand because that was insufficient, and he did not say I'm sorry because that wasn't the right register either. And what he actually did was simply look at her and let her see that he had received what she'd sent, fully and without editing. Her expression shifted in a way he couldn't name but felt. You understood, she said. Yes, he said. That took most students. She stopped. Reconsidered. That was faster than I expected. You weren't expecting me to be one of your students yesterday, he said. Your expectations are being recalibrated in real time. Yes, she said. And then, what did you understand? That you've been alone for a very long time, he said. And that something recently started feeling different about that. And that the difference is strange and new and you're holding it carefully. She was very still. That is accurate, she said. Can I ask something? You will regardless, she said. And then, with what he was beginning to identify as her version of deliberate humor, I have learned this about you. He smiled. The thing you communicated, was that intentional? Did you choose to send that specifically? A long pause. I chose to send something in the actual register, she said carefully. The content of what transmitted was. Another pause. The register does not lie. I cannot communicate something false in it. It transmits what is present, not what I select. I selected the act of communicating. What communicated was. She looked at her hands. The first time he had seen her look at her own hands, the first time she had seemed to need something to look at that wasn't him. What was present? Issei was quiet. Okay, he said gently. Thank you for trusting me with it. She looked up. It was not fully a choice. I know, he said. That makes it more important to thank you for, not less. Drake was the one who reached out to Ophis directly. Issei felt it happen, not the content of the exchange, which moved at a register even deeper than what Ophis had just shown him, but the fact of it. The sense of two ancient things oriented toward each other, communicating in the way of beings who had both been alive since before most of the current world's reference points. He waited. It went on for some time. Ophis had closed her eyes, the first time he had seen her close her eyes. Drake was a warm vibration in his chest, deeper and more present than usual. When it ended, both of them were quiet for a moment. What was that? Issei asked. We spoke, Drake said. His voice was different, not in timbre but in quality, the way someone's voice is different after they have said something they have been holding for a very long time. We have not spoken directly in a considerable duration. What did you talk about? You, Drake said. Among other things. Should I be concerned? No. A pause. She asked me what it is like, being your partner. I told her honestly. Another pause. She listened very carefully. What did you tell her? Drake was quiet for a moment with that depth he sometimes had. I told her, he said, that you are the first partner I have had who treated the relationship as real. Who did not experience me as a power housed in his arm but as a companion, an entity with my own perspective, my own history, my own grief. A pause. I told her that existing in you is different from every other existence I have had, that I had not expected to find, after everything, something that felt like being known. Issei was quiet. She said, Drake continued very carefully, that she understood what I meant. That she was beginning to understand it. The dimensional gap moved around them, slow and enormous. Drake, Issei said. Yes. Are you okay? A pause that had something fragile in it, which was not a quality he associated with the Welsh dragon. I am, Drake said, unexpectedly moved. Which is not a state I have much experience with. I am processing it. Take your time, Issei said. You say that, Drake said to everyone. It's always true, Issei said. Ophis opened her eyes. She looked at him with an expression that was different from any he had catalogued so far. Not warmer, not colder, not more or less anything. Simply, changed. The way a landscape is changed by something that has moved through it, not damaged, just different than it was. Your partner, she said. Yeah, he is, she paused. He speaks of you with a quality I do not have a clean word for. He'd tell you he's just being accurate, Issei said. Yes, she said. He told me that. A pause. He also told me that you have a habit of ensuring the people around you feel seen. That you do this without calculation, without agenda. That it is simply what you do. Issei was quiet for a moment. He said that? He said you did it for him before anyone else did, Ophis said. He said it changed what he understood existence to be capable of. She looked at him with those eyes that had been watching dimensions longer than history. I found that statement significant. Why? Because Drake is not a being who offers that kind of statement lightly. He has been alive longer than most concepts. He has observed an enormous range of things. For something to change what he understands existence to be capable of. She paused. That is not a small thing. It didn't feel like a big thing when I did it, Issei said. I just talked to him. Listened to him. Treated him like someone worth talking to. Yes, Ophis said. That is what Drake said. A pause. He said the simplicity of it was the point. They sat in the silence of the gap. Your turn, Issei said. She looked at him. The dragon register, he said. You sent something. I want to send something back. She was still for a moment. You have not practiced the transmission. Only the receiving. I know, he said. But you said the register doesn't lie. It transmits what's present. So I don't need to practice the transmission. I just need to be honest about what's present and let it go. She regarded him. That is a sound understanding of the mechanism, she said. Most beings require years to reach that understanding. I've been thinking about honesty a lot lately, he said. About what it actually means to be honest versus what it means to perform honesty. The register you're describing sounds like the version where you can't perform. Correct, she said. Then it's easier, he said. Not harder. Performance is the hard part. He looked at her. He found what was present, didn't search for it, didn't select it, just found it the way you find something you've been carrying without knowing it. The genuine surprise of this place. The strange rightness of sitting in the dimensional gap drinking average tea with the most powerful entity in existence who was, underneath the infinite power, someone who had never been asked what they wanted. The feeling of something being real before he had any framework for what it was. The recognition, clear and unperformed, that whatever this was, it mattered. He let it go outward, in the register she had shown him. Her eyes widened. It was a tiny movement, a fraction of something in eyes that had been perfectly still through everything. But he saw it. She was quiet for a long moment. That was, she stopped. Started again. You transmitted clearly. Good, he said. What did you receive? That you find this, she paused. That you find me, real. Worth the attention. Not as a power source. Not as a strategic consideration. She paused. As a person. As whatever you are, Issei said. Which is larger than a person. But the same quality of thing, in the relevant sense. She was very still. No one has transmitted that to me, she said. I know, he said. That's why I did. The afternoon, if afternoon was a concept that applied, involved Issei attempting the transmission again, this time while simultaneously maintaining structural awareness of the gap around him. Ophis explained that advanced dragon communication happened while fully present in a space, not just while sitting still and focusing. He stood in the larger area of the gap. He felt the pressure of it, less overwhelming than the day before, not because it had lessened but because he had, as Tannen's training had laid the groundwork for, simply become more capable of standing in things. He tried the transmission. What came out was muddier than before. The effort of maintaining spatial awareness split his presence, and the register picked up the split and transmitted it faithfully, which meant Ophis received something that was partially what he intended and partially the experience of trying to do two things at once. Again, she said. He tried again, and again. On the sixth attempt, something clicked, not a technique, not a skill, but a recognition. He understood that the two things were not separate tasks. Spatial awareness and authentic presence were the same movement, not two different ones. Being fully here included being fully aware of where here was. The transmission went clean. Ophis was quiet for a moment. There, she said. He breathed. That's what you feel like when you transmit, he said. Not the content. The quality. That completeness. Yes, she said. It's different from the inside than I expected. How did you expect it to feel? Bigger, he said. More effortful. More like power. He paused. It just feels like being completely present. It feels like the opposite of effort. Yes, she said. That is what it is. A pause. Power is what happens when presence meets resistance. This register has no resistance. It simply is. He looked at the gap around them, the enormous dark fullness of it. Is this what it's like for you? He asked. All the time? Just existing without resistance? She thought about it. In the gap, she said, yes. Outside the gap, I meet resistance constantly. Every faction. Every political arrangement. Every being that approaches me with an agenda. She paused. In the gap there is no resistance because nothing here wants anything from me. Except now there's me, he said. Yes, she said. Except now there is you. A pause. But you are different. You are here, and you want things, in the sense that you want tea and you want honesty, and you want to understand things, but you do not want to use the gap. You do not want to use me. She paused. You are the first thing in this space that has wants, and is not in the gap because of those wants. I'm here because you brought me here, he said. Yes, she said. I brought you. That is also different. In all my existence, I have not brought something here. Things come seeking me, or I encounter them outside. I have never retrieved something. She paused. The act of retrieving you from that battle was the first time I have moved towards something rather than waiting for it to come to me. Issei looked at her. What made you move? He asked. She was quiet for a long moment. I did not want to watch you die, she said. The sentence was simple and precise and clearly cost her something in the saying, not because it was untrue but because naming it made it more real than observing it had. Ophis, he said. She looked at him. I'm glad you moved, he said. She was still for a moment that had depth to it. I am also glad, she said, with the careful precision of someone saying something for the first time. I did not have a word for this before. Glad? She tried it again quietly. I am glad. That evening, the gap's version of it, which Issei was tracking by his own internal clock, he sat at the threshold of his space and looked out into the larger gap and let himself think without organizing the thoughts. Drake settled in his chest with the quality of a companion sitting beside you, present but undemanding. She's been alone for an unimaginable amount of time, Issei said. Yes, Drake said. And something about me specifically broke through that. I don't fully understand why. I think, Drake said slowly, that it is not complicated, when examined clearly. She is a being who has experienced everything except genuine attention given without agenda. Every interaction she has had has been structured around what she possesses. Her power, her position, her presence in the gap. No one has ever simply been curious about her, about what she thinks, what she experiences, what she wants. A pause. You asked her if she wanted tea. That's a small thing, Issei said. For you, yes. For her, it was the first time anyone had offered her something without wanting something in return. Another pause. Small is not a category that means the same thing for all people. For some people, the small thing is the only thing that would have reached them. Issei sat with this. Drake. Yes. What do you think this is? What we're doing here? A long pause. I think, Drake said, with the careful honesty of something that had existed long enough to mean what it said, that something real is beginning. I cannot tell you what shape it will take. I cannot give you a framework because no framework exists for this. A human in the dimensional gap, being trained by the infinite dragon god, who retrieved him from a battle because she did not want to watch him die. A pause. But I can tell you that in all my history, I have never felt what I am feeling in here. And what I am feeling is that this is right. In the deep sense. Not convenient, not strategic. Right. Issei looked at the dimensional gap, the enormous, ancient, full darkness of it. She said this is where she comes for silence, he said. Yes. But she prepared a space in it before she formally decided to bring me here, he said. She was making room before she made the choice. Yes, Drake said. That means the silence she wanted wasn't just silence, Issei said. It was silence with something in it. Something specific. He paused. She just didn't know what it was yet. Drake was very quiet. Partner, he said finally. Yeah, I believe you may be the most perceptive person I have ever been housed in. You've been housed in 37 people, Issei said. That's not as impressive a statement as it sounds. Given the quality of some of those 37, Drake said, with feeling, it is considerably more impressive than you are giving it credit for. Issei laughed. The gap received the sound of it, something warm and human in the vast ancient dark, and Issei had the sense, not quite hearing but close to it, that somewhere in the gap, Ophis had turned slightly toward it. He looked out into the enormous, full silence. Good night, he said to the gap, to no specific location. From somewhere in the dark, not quite sound but close to it, the register beneath language, carrying something small and new and carefully held. Good night. He sat with that for a long time. Then he went inside and lay down on the not quite comfortable surface and slept deeply, and dreamed of open windows. 7 days in the dimensional gap had changed Issei's relationship with silence. Not eliminated his comfort with noise. He was still, fundamentally, a person who thought out loud and laughed too easily and occasionally narrated his own actions when he was alone. A habit Drake had stopped commenting on after day 3 because commenting on it had only encouraged it. But the silence of the gap had gotten into him the way cold water gets into you on a winter morning. Not unpleasantly, just thoroughly, reaching places you didn't know needed reaching. He noticed it in the training. The dragon register required a quality of interior quiet that he had been building towards since Tannen's mountain, and the gap accelerated it. Living in Ophis's silence was like being in a master class in the thing itself. She did not perform silence. She did not maintain it. She simply was it, and being near her was an education. He noticed it in how he woke up. Not scrambling toward the day, not already in motion. He opened his eyes and was simply present in the first moments, feeling the gap's particular quality of reality around him, before anything else began. He noticed it most in the training sessions, which had developed a rhythm over the week, not a schedule, because Ophis did not organize time the way beings with lifespans organize time, but a quality of return. She came to his space. They drank average tea, which she now expected without comment and held with the same complete attention every time. They worked in the register. Then she took him somewhere. The somewhere was different each day. Today, she had said, would be different from the previous somewheres. I am going to show you the gap, she said. He looked at the space around them. The something like walls, the vast darkness beyond the threshold. I've been in the gap for a week. You have been in a portion of the gap that has been prepared for human habitation, she said. Moderated. The way you might prepare a room in a house, but the house is larger than you have seen. She paused. Today I will show you the house. He stood up from his rock. Should I be concerned? He asked. Possibly, she said. I do not know what the experience will produce in you. I have not brought anyone here before. A pause. I will be present. If the experience becomes, I'll be fine, he said. She looked at him. You said that with certainty, she said. I have certainty about the relevant part, he said. I don't know what I'm going to see. I do know that you'll be there. That's enough certainty. Something shifted in her expression. The deepening he had come to recognize, the thing that happened when something landed that she had not prepared for. Come, she said. She moved into the gap the way she always moved, as if movement was an option she was choosing rather than a mechanism she required. He walked beside her, which felt simultaneously mundane and extraordinary, and the something-like walls of his space receded and became the larger gap around them. He had seen the gap before, from inside his space. The enormous dark fullness, the sense of something that moved like deep water. But seeing it from a designated area was different from moving through it, and moving through it now, without the moderation Ophis had built into his space, he felt the difference immediately. It pressed against him, not the way Ophis's presence pressed against him in training, which was a directed thing, a chosen pressure. This was ambient. The gap itself pressing against the fact of him, the small specific human fact of him, the way depth presses against a diver. He breathed. He planted his feet in the way Tannen had taught him, not in the physical sense but in the existential sense, locating his own presence and standing in it. The pressure stabilized. Ophis, beside him, noticed. You adjusted quickly. I've been practicing standing in enormous things, he said. Tannen's teaching, and yours. She inclined her head slightly, the closest she came to acknowledgement gestures. They moved deeper. The first thing he saw was the dimensions. Not one, all of them. Or rather, the gap touched all of them, and moving through the gap meant moving through a space from which all of them were visible. The way moving through a long corridor means having windows to every room. The dimensions were not visible exactly. They were present, the way sounds are present in a room even when you're not focusing on any specific one. He could feel them. The human world, mundane, bustling, entirely unaware of the space adjacent to it. The underworld, with its different quality of power, dense and stratified. Heaven, which had a quality he couldn't name but felt like altitude. And others, dozens, hundreds, dimensions that had no name in any language he spoke. How many are there? He asked. I have not counted, Ophis said. More than would be useful to count. Can you feel all of them? All the time? Yes. He tried to imagine this and found that imagination was insufficient. Feeling one dimension, the human world, which was where he had spent his entire life, was everything he had ever known. She felt all of them simultaneously, all the time, from this space between them. Is that overwhelming? He asked. She thought about it. It is what is, she said. I have not experienced the absence of it, so I have no comparative. I do not know if it is overwhelming because I have never known what not overwhelming would feel like. He thought about this for a moment. That might be the most honest answer to that question I've ever heard, he said. She looked at him briefly. I find honest answers to be the only worth giving, she said. So do I, he said. Most people don't, though. I know, she said. I have observed a great deal of dishonesty across a great many beings over an extensive duration. It is common. She paused. I have found it to be primarily driven by fear. Fear of being known. Fear of what the other party will do with the knowledge. Another pause. I do not fear being known by you. He looked at her. Why not? He asked. Because, she said, of everything I have observed in you, I have not observed any instance of using what you know about someone against them. She was quiet for a moment. You use what you know about someone for them. Even when it would be easier or more advantageous not to. I don't think of it as a strategy, he said. No, she said. That is what makes it reliable. They moved further into the gap. The second thing he saw was the scale of her, not her physical presence. He had been with her physical presence for a week and had calibrated to it. The scale of what she was, visible in the gap the way a person is visible in their own home. The fullness of her nature expressed in the space that was most native to it. The gap was not just where she lived. In some significant sense, the gap was an expression of her. The enormous, full silence was not something she existed in. It was something she and the gap had become, together, over a duration too long to process. She had not come to the gap and found silence. She had been in the gap long enough that her nature and its nature had converged. She was the silence, not metaphorically. In some fundamental registration of reality, Ophis and the silence of the dimensional gap were the same thing. And what he had been interacting with for a week, the figure who held teacups and deepened her expression when something landed and asked him what gladness felt like, was her choosing to be particular within the whole of what she was. Choosing a shape small enough to have a conversation. He stopped walking. She stopped beside him. You see it, she said. Yes, he said. Most beings, when they see it, feel fear, she said. The scale of it. What I actually am. She paused. What do you feel? He checked honestly. Sad, he said. She looked at him. Explain. Because it's lonely, he said. Being that. Being something that large and being alone in it. Having all of this and having no one to share it with who isn't trying to take something from it. He looked at the gap, the enormous full darkness that was her nature expressing itself in its native register. You've been this for all of that time. And no one ever just sat in it with you. She was very still. No, she said. I'm sorry, he said. You did not cause it. I know, he said. I'm still sorry it happened. I'm sorry you were alone in this for so long. He looked at her. You deserved company. The silence of the gap, her silence, pressed around them in a way that was different from how it had pressed before. Not lighter, denser, in the way of something that has been contained for a long time and is being allowed, incrementally, to exist at its actual volume. I did not know, she said slowly, that I deserved anything. Deserving is a concept I have understood intellectually but never applied to myself. Why not? Because I am the infinite dragon god, she said. It was not arrogance, it was the flatness of fact. I am, in most frameworks, the ultimate point of reference. Most things measure themselves against me. I do not have a reference point against which to measure whether I deserve things. She paused. You are offering me a reference point. What reference point? He asked. That even things which are ultimate points of reference are still things that exist. And things that exist deserve not to be alone. He looked at her. Yes, he said. Exactly that. She was quiet for a long time. The gap moved around them, slow and enormous, and she stood in it with the quality of something that was precisely where it belonged and was, for possibly the first time in its existence, glad about that. Issei, she said. It was the first time she had used his given name without the slight formality of full address. He noticed this. Yeah, he said. What does it feel like, she said, to choose something? The question arrived with the quality of something that had been forming for a long time. Not a casual question, not a conversational turn. A question she had been building toward, the way geological features build, slowly and with enormous pressure. He took it seriously. Choosing something, he said, feels like locating what's true inside you and then acting from it. Not from what you're supposed to want. Not from what other people want you to want, from what's actually there. He paused. It feels like being in the dragon register. It feels like the version of yourself that the register transmits, the one that can't lie. He paused. And there's something that comes after the choice. Not always immediately. But there's a rightness that arrives, if the choice was genuine. Like something settling. She absorbed this with the complete attention she gave everything. I have not chosen many things, she said. I have existed. I have responded to what exists. I have moved toward what serves my purpose. She paused. I am not certain I have chosen in the sense you describe. What about bringing me here? He said. She was quiet. I did not experience that as a choice, she said. I experienced it as inevitable. As something that was happening before I formally decided. That might be what choosing feels like, Issei said, when the choice is very honest. When it's not argued with. You don't usually feel yourself decide the things that are most true. They're just already decided when you arrive at them. She looked at him with those eyes that had been watching dimensions since before the current universe's configuration. You are describing what happened, she said. I know, he said. You were already decided, she said. Before I formally brought you here. I had decided, without the formal decision. Yeah, he said. That is what choosing feels like, she said, not as a question. That's what it feels like when the choice is right, he said. They went further. The things he saw after that were not categorizable in language, and he had learned enough about the gap's communication register to understand that language was not the right tool for them anyway. He received them the way he had learned to receive Ophis's transmissions, fully, without immediately reaching for translation, letting the experience be itself first. He saw the place where the gap touched the oldest dimension, older than the current universe, older than the factions and their politics and their histories, a dimension that existed in the same way that a first word exists before any other words. He felt it rather than saw it, and what he felt was something like the feeling of standing in a very old forest, where the trees have been there long enough that the ground has become an archive. He saw the place where the gap touched nothing, not darkness, not void, but the actual absence of dimension, the space that existed before anything decided to be anything. It was not frightening, it was simply prior. A reminder that everything, including every power and every faction and every ancient being, was something that had decided to be something, and before the deciding there was this. He saw the place in the gap that was Ophis's most private. He knew it immediately. It had the quality of something that had been lived in alone for a very long time. Not decorated, not organized for habitation. Just inhabited. The way you can feel when a space has been someone's space, not from objects in it but from the quality of presence that has accumulated there. He stood in it, and said nothing. She stood beside him. You have not asked what this is, she said. I know what it is, he said. How? Because it feels like you, he said. Like the part of you that doesn't perform even the small amount you performed for me. He paused. This is where you are when you're just being, not explaining yourself to anyone. Not moderating your presence for company. He looked around at the ancient, inhabited quality of it. You've been here alone for a very long time. Yes, she said. I'm honored you showed me, he said. She was quiet for a moment. I did not plan to show you this, she said. We were moving and I brought us here without deciding to. She paused. Again. The honest choices, he said. Yes, she said. The honest choices. He stood in the most private space of the most powerful being in existence, and felt the weight of what it meant to be trusted with it. Not the strategic weight. There was no strategy here. The human weight. The weight of something being shown to you because you were the first person the showing seemed possible with. Thank you, he said. She inclined her head. Then, with the precision of someone who has considered a statement fully before making it, you are the first thing I have chosen to bring here. She paused. You are the first thing I have chosen in the sense you described. From what is true, without arguing. Another pause. I find that I do not want to argue with it. Issei looked at her. She was looking at him with those eyes, the whole history of existence in them, and underneath that history, something new and small and carefully held, the way she had held the teacup on the first morning, attending to it fully because it was new and new things, in an existence as long as hers, were to be attended to completely. Good, he said. Don't argue with it. I don't intend to, she said. They returned to his space at what his body reported as late afternoon. He sat on his rock. She sat in her way, near enough that the space between them was companionable rather than vast, and the gap moved around them. I want to ask you something, he said. You will regardless, she said, and there was the quality in it now, the familiar quality, the one that had been building over 7 days of average tea and honest transmissions and being shown things no one else had been shown. The snake cult, he said. The Cows Brigade. They used you. She was quiet. They told you the goal was to return to the gap, he said. To recover the pieces of your power that were taken. They used that as leverage. Yes, she said. Was that actually what you wanted? He asked. Or was it what they told you that you wanted? A very long pause. Both, she said finally. Initially, both. The return to the gap, to silence, to the absence of the complication of being, was genuinely what I wanted. I had experienced existence outside the gap as unpleasant. Noisy. Full of things wanting something from me. She paused. They were accurate that I wanted to return. They were inaccurate about everything else. What were they inaccurate about? He asked. They believed that what I wanted was to cease being particular, she said. To dissolve back into the gap's silence, and stop being Ophis. Stop being a discrete entity with a perspective. They thought my desire for silence was a desire for erasure. She paused. It was not. It was a desire for the right silence. The silence that is present because nothing is demanding anything, not the silence that is present because there is nothing left to demand. She looked at him. I did not have this distinction clearly before. I believe I am finding it now. Issei nodded slowly. Because the silence here isn't empty anymore, he said. It has not been empty, she said carefully, since you arrived in it. He looked at the gap around them, the enormous, full darkness that was both hers and itself, both ancient and, in some increment too small for most instruments to measure, changed. Ophis, he said. Yes. I think the thing you've been wanting, for all of this time, it wasn't the absence of everything. It was the presence of something genuine. He paused. Something that was here because it chose to be, not because it wanted something. She was very still. Yes, she said. The word was quiet and precise and had the quality of something recognized rather than something discovered. I'm here because you brought me, he said. But I'm staying because I want to. She looked at him. Those are different things, she said. Very different, he agreed. Partner, Drake said very softly inside his mind. Not a warning. Not a commentary. Just present, the companionable presence of someone sitting beside you who knows this is a significant moment, and is not going to interrupt it. Issei looked at Ophis, at the ancient, enormous, precise thing she was, and at the new small careful thing she was also becoming, the thing that held teacups and noticed when he was open in sleep and asked what gladness felt like and brought him to her most private place without deciding to. I'm staying, he said. Simply. Completely. She held the words with the same complete attention she held everything. Then she said, with the careful precision of someone stating something for the first time that has been true for longer than the statement, I am glad you are here. Me too, he said. The gap moved around them, slow and enormous, full and no longer only silent, inhabited, now, by something new, something that had no faction and no precedent and no framework yet, but that existed with the certainty of an honest choice. Drake hummed in Issei's chest, deep and resonant and content. Outside in the gap, in the space that was most privately hers, something ancient sat and felt the silence differently than it had felt it before, not as the goal, but as the backdrop. The thing that made it possible to hear, clearly, the small genuine sounds of something being chosen. That night, Issei sat at the threshold and looked into the gap and let himself think clearly about what was happening. He was not confused about it. That was the thing he checked first. Whether he was confused, whether he was in the middle of something he didn't understand, whether he needed to slow down. He ran the honest check the way Tannen had taught him, the way Drake had refined, the way the register demanded. He was not confused. He was in something he had never been in before. That was different from confusion. He thought about Ophis, the precision of her, the honesty, the ancient loneliness and the new small careful thing growing alongside it. He thought about her saying I did not want to watch you die with the flat accuracy of someone who was unable to dress a thing up as anything other than what it was. He thought about her in the most private part of the gap, having brought him there without deciding to, standing beside him, while he registered the weight of being trusted with it. He thought, this is real. Whatever shape it takes, whatever it becomes, it is grounded in the most honest thing I know how to do, which is show up completely and let what is true be true. Partner, Drake said. Yeah, I want to tell you something. Go ahead. In all my time, all 37 partners, all the centuries, all the things I have been part of and witnessed, I have never been in the presence of something forming that felt like this. A pause. I am not able to tell you what it will become. The shape of it is not visible to me yet. But the quality of it, the honesty and the choosing and the showing up, that I can assess. Another pause. It is the best quality of thing I have witnessed. In all my time. Issei was quiet. That's a significant statement, he said. Yes, Drake said. I made it carefully. The gap moved. The silence held, not empty, not oppressive. Simply present, the way good silence is present. The kind that exists between people who are comfortable enough with each other to stop filling it. Good night, Issei said to the gap, to no specific location. The register beneath language, not words, not sound, but the transmission of something present, came back from somewhere in the vast dark. Something that translated, as closely as language could translate it, to "I am here." Not good night. Not a return of the pleasantry. Something more fundamental, more ancient, more honest. I am here. He sat with it for a long time, the warmth of it, the simple enormous fact of it. Then he went inside. He slept without dreaming, in the prepared warmth of a space that had been made before the decision to make it, and outside in the gap, something that had been alone for longer than history was, for the first time in all of that time, not alone. The supernatural world noticed on day 8. Not immediately. The first 2 days of Issei's absence had been absorbed by the Gremry household's internal reckoning. The note and the spare key and the conversation around the kitchen table that had lasted most of a morning. Days 3 through 5 had been spent in the controlled search that Rias had organized with the precision she applied to everything, thorough and systematic and entirely unsuccessful. Days 6 and 7 had produced the first external ripples. A rating game opponent's faction asking why the Red Dragon Emperor had missed a preliminary assessment. A neutral Devil House inquiring about a scheduled peerage meeting that had quietly been cancelled. Day 8 was when the 3 factions began asking questions simultaneously, which was the supernatural world's version of a situation becoming serious. Rias was in the middle of her 4th scrying attempt when her brother's communication circle activated. Surzek's Lucifer's face in the circle had the quality of someone who had been patient for a precise amount of time, and had now reached the end of it. "Sister," he said. "Nisama," she said, in the tone of someone who has been expecting this call and had hoped to have more information before it arrived. "Issei Haida has been missing for 8 days, Surzek said. The Red Dragon Emperor. Your pawn. The being who is arguably the most significant power asset in the current geopolitical arrangement of the underworld." A pause, with the quality of patience that was also a warning. "I am hearing about this from a neutral faction house rather than from you." "I have been managing the situation," Rias said. "You have been managing the situation privately," Surzek said, "which is different, and which has now become impossible because Heaven sent us an inquiry this morning and Azazel called an hour ago." He looked at her carefully. "Rias. Where is he?" She was quiet. "I don't know," she said. The silence on Surzek's end had a specific quality. "Tell me," he said, gently but with the weight of the Lucifer title behind the gentleness, "what happened?" In heaven, Irina Shida was having a conversation she had not expected to be having, with a superior she had not expected to be called to see, about a topic that hit considerably closer to home than the formal setting was designed to accommodate. "The Red Dragon Emperor," the superior said, "has been uncontactable for 8 days. His peerage has not filed any explanation. The Gremry girl has been running private searches. We have had no communication from any party." A pause. "Given his significance to the current balance of power, Heaven has a legitimate interest in his location and status." Irina sat with her hands folded and her expression carefully neutral and thought about Issei, about his loudness and his enthusiasm and the way he crashed into things and meant all of it, every single bit of it, which she had known him long enough to be certain of. "He's not in danger," she said, without being certain this was true. Her superior looked at her. "What makes you say that?" the superior asked. "Because if he were in danger," Irina said, with the particular certainty of someone who had grown up with a person and retained, across all the strangeness of their diverged paths, a fundamental understanding of them, "we would know. It would be loud. Everything with Issei is loud." She paused. "The fact that it's quiet means he chose it." Her superior was quiet for a moment. "That raises its own concerns," the superior said. "I know," Irina said. "But they're different concerns." Azazel, in the Grigori, was less formal about it. He called Kiba directly, which was either a compliment to Kiba's reputation for being the most reasonable member of the Gremry peerage or a tactical decision based on the same assessment. "Okay," Azazel said, without preamble. "Dragon Boy. Where is he?" Kiba, who had learned a great deal about navigating conversations with very powerful beings from years of proximity to several, said, "He left voluntarily. He's safe. He needs time." "Time for what?" "Personal reasons." "Personal reasons," Azazel repeated, with the tone of someone who had been alive long enough to know that personal reasons were never as personal as claimed when they involved the Red Dragon Emperor. Kiba, I like you. I also need you to understand that the Red Dragon Emperor going off-grid is not a personal matter. It is a geopolitical event. It is, Kiba agreed. But it started as a personal one. The geopolitical dimension is secondary. A pause. Is he all right? Azazel asked. The question was genuine, not strategic, just direct. It was, Kiba thought, one of Azazel's better qualities. I think, Kiba said carefully, that he is in the process of becoming more all right than he has been in some time. That is the most diplomatic non-answer I've received in a while, Azazel said. Thank you, Kiba said. It wasn't a compliment. But the tone had shifted slightly. Tell him, when you're in contact, that the Grigori has no hostile interest in his location. We're asking because we're concerned, not because we want to contain him. I'll tell him, Kiba said. He did not mention that his most recent attempt to contact Issei had returned nothing, not a rejection, just silence, the kind that meant the contact had reached somewhere that normal communication didn't penetrate. He had a suspicion about where that somewhere was. He kept the suspicion to himself. Ophis knew before Issei did. She was the dimensional gap. Information that moved between dimensions moved through her, the way sound moves through air. She did not seek it, she simply was the medium. She felt the faction inquiries the way you feel a change in air pressure, and she processed them with the patience of something that had outlasted every political arrangement she had ever observed. She came to his space in the morning, their morning, the internal clock morning, and did not sit down. He looked up from the tea he was making and registered the difference in her quality of presence. Not agitated, she was constitutionally incapable of agitation in the way most beings experienced it, but alert in a different way than usual. Present in a more directed fashion. Something happened, he said. Nothing has happened yet, she said. Something is building. He set down the camp stove and gave her his full attention. She told him, with her characteristic precision, what she had felt moving through the gap. The three factions inquiring simultaneously. Rias's escalating search. The geopolitical weight that the supernatural world attached to his absence. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. I knew this would happen, he said. Not this specifically. But that my leaving would become a larger thing than just a personal decision. Yes, she said. The Red Dragon Emperor's location is not, in most frameworks, a private matter. It should be, he said. It should just be a person deciding where to be. Yes, she said. It should be. She paused. But it is not, given what you are. Another pause, with the quality of something that had been considered carefully before being said. I can address it. He looked at her. How? By communicating to the factions clearly that you are here and that the matter is resolved. She paused. They will have questions. I will not answer them. I will simply state the relevant facts. He was quiet for a moment. You'd do that? He said. Yes, she said. Why? He asked. Not challenge, genuine question. He had learned to ask her why because her answers were always more precise and more honest than what he would have assumed. She thought about it with the care she gave everything. Because, she said, you are here because you chose to be. That is the fundamental fact of the situation. The factions are treating your absence as a problem to be solved, as a resource that has been misplaced. That framing is incorrect, and I have the capacity to correct it. She paused. Also because, she stopped. He waited. Because the idea of them finding you here, she said, carefully, and treating it as a recovery rather than a choice, is something I find unacceptable. He looked at her. That's protective, he said. She considered this. Yes, she said. I believe it is. Thank you, he said. Do not thank me yet, she said. I am planning to call a meeting of all three factions simultaneously and deliver a statement that will not be open for discussion. This will cause political turbulence. Issei stared at her. All three factions, he said. At once. It is more efficient, she said. Ophis, the three factions have not voluntarily been in the same room since the peace treaty. They will be in the same room now, she said, with the complete flatness of something that had never had a reason to consider whether things were possible before deciding to do them. I am the infinite dragon god. Rooms are a relative concept. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Can I be there?" She regarded him. "You wish to be present." "It's about me," he said. "And I've spent enough time being absent from conversations that were about me." Something in her expression deepened. "Yes," she said. "You should be present." The space Ophis created for the meeting was not a room in any architectural sense. It was a section of the dimensional gap, the prepared, moderated section, reorganized to accommodate multiple parties, with the quality of a declared neutral ground, which it was, in the most absolute sense possible. Nothing in existence was more neutral than the space between dimensions, and nothing in existence could credibly claim territory rights in a space that belonged, in every meaningful sense, to Ophis. She sent the summons the way she communicated, through the register beneath language, through the gap that touched every dimension. It was not a request. It did not have the quality of a request. It was a fact that a meeting was happening, delivered with the calm certainty of something that had existed longer than every faction combined. The representatives arrived within 2 hours. Sirzek's Lucifer came for the Devil faction, because this was the kind of situation that required the actual Mao and not a representative. He arrived with the composed authority of someone who had genuine power, and was also, underneath it, deeply curious about what was happening. He had brought no retinue, the summons had implied, without stating that retinues were not the right register for this meeting. Michael came for heaven, with the dignified calm that was his characteristic state, and the very slight quality of wariness that even the leader of heaven's angels felt when summoned to the dimensional gap. Azazel came for the Grigori, because Azazel went to things personally when things were interesting, and this was objectively interesting. They arrived in the prepared space and found 2 things they had not expected. The first was Ophis, which they had expected. The second was Issei Hayadu, standing beside her, looking considerably less disheveled than his 8-day absence might have suggested, with the particular quality of someone who has been doing something difficult and important, and is not apologetic about it. Azazel looked at Issei for a long moment. "Huh," he said. This was the most compressed form of a great deal of assessment. Sirzek looked at his sister's pawn, at the young man he had observed from a careful distance for over a year, had assessed as significant, had hoped Rias was treating with the full regard he deserved. He noted the quality of Issei's presence. He noted the way Issei was standing. He noted the proximity to Ophis, not pressed together, not performing anything, simply existing in the same space with the ease of people who had been in each other's company long enough to stop being formal about it. He filed several observations and said nothing. Michael looked at all of this with the patience of heaven and waited for Ophis to speak. Ophis spoke. "Issei Hayadu is in the dimensional gap," she said. "He is here because he chose to be. He is under no compulsion, no contract, no obligation. He is training. He is well. The matter of his location is resolved." She paused. "We are done." Silence. The 3 most powerful individuals of the 3 supernatural factions processed this statement. Azazel, who had the least patience for formal processing. "That's it? That's the whole meeting?" "Yes," Ophis said. "You called all 3 factions into the dimensional gap to tell us he's fine, and he's here by choice." "Yes. And we're not getting any more information than that." "No." Azazel looked at Issei. "You want to weigh in here?" "She covered it," Issei said. Azazel looked at him for a moment with the assessment of someone who was very good at reading situations, and was reading this one carefully. "You seem different," he said. 8 days is a long time," Issei said. 8 days isn't usually long enough to seem different in the way you seem different. He paused. "You seem like someone who made a decision and is solid about it." "Yeah," Issei said. "That's accurate." Sirzek spoke for the first time, quietly, with the weight that his title and his genuine nature combined to produce. "Issei-kun. The Gremry peerage, my sister, has been searching for you." "I know," Issei said. "You understand the concern." "Yes," Issei said. "And I understand the difference between concern and the assumption that I'm a resource that's been misplaced." He paused. "I left of my own choice," with a note explaining that I left of my own choice, asking for time. "The search is concern. The factions treating my location as a geopolitical problem is something else." Sirzek was quiet for a moment. "That is," he said carefully, "a fair distinction." "Thank you," Issei said. "Michael, who had been processing all of this with the calm attention of someone who understood that the most significant things often announce themselves quietly. You are training with Ophis. Yes, Issei said, voluntarily. Yes. And she, Michael paused, and the pause had something in it that was not quite surprise but was adjacent to it. She is training you voluntarily. Yes, Ophis said. Michael looked at her. He had known her, in the way that ancient beings of significant power knew each other, across great distance, through the movements of history, never closely. He looked at her now with the full attention of someone who was observing something he had not observed before, and was updating his understanding accordingly. He did not say what he was thinking. He said, Heaven will respect Issei-kun's stated choice. We will communicate to our affiliates that the matter is resolved. Thank you, Issei said. Azazel, Grigori likewise. No pursuit, no monitoring, no involvement. He paused. I will say, for the record, that this is the most efficiently resolved geopolitical situation I have been summoned to in about 300 years. He looked at Ophis. 5 minutes. Impressive. It was not complicated, Ophis said. The facts were simple. The facts were simple, Azazel agreed, but the situation they describe is not simple, actually, is it? He was looking between Ophis and Issei with the expression of someone who had correctly identified something he was not going to voice in this room. But that's not my business. No, Ophis agreed. It is not. Surzex was last. He looked at Issei for a long moment, the kind of look that carried a message, and then said, Is there anything you need? From the Devil faction, from me personally. As someone who is glad you are safe. Issei looked at him. The question was genuine. He could feel the sincerity of it, and he thought about what Surzex's position was, a brother who loved his sister, and had probably, if he was paying the kind of attention his reputation suggested he paid, understood that something had gone wrong before Issei had left. He thought about what it cost someone of Surzex's stature to ask that question without any political framing around it. Right now, Issei said, just the space to do what I'm doing. You have it, Surzex said. He looked at Ophis once more, a look that communicated, in the precise wordless language of people who understood power, something that was not a warning and not a request, and was perhaps the closest Surzex could come to saying take care of him to an entity who was not accustomed to being told anything. Ophis received it. And returned something that was not an acknowledgement, exactly, but was the dimensional gap's version of one. The representatives left. The gap settled around them, returning to its natural quality, the pressure of external things receding. Issei let out a slow breath. That was, he said, one of the more unusual meetings I've been in. Was it unsatisfying? Ophis asked. He looked at her. No. It was exactly what I needed it to be. He paused. You called all 3 factions into the dimensional gap and delivered 1 paragraph and dismissed them. The paragraph contained all relevant information. I know, he said. That's what I mean. You could have made it complicated. You made it simple. He paused. Because the truth was simple. Yes, she said. You're very good at that, he said. Making the truth the only thing in the room. She was quiet for a moment. I have found, over a long existence, she said, that complexity is usually the result of someone not wanting to say the simple thing. The simple thing is almost always available. Most beings simply do not want to say it. What's the simple thing you didn't say in there? He asked. She looked at him. Several things, she said. Tell me one. She considered. That when Surzex looked at me, she said, and communicated his concern for you, I understood it more completely than he intended me to. Because it is not different from what I feel. She paused. I did not say that in the meeting because it is not the meeting's business. But it is the truth. Issei was very still. You feel protective of me, he said. Yes, she said. Since when? She thought about it. Since I was watching the battle, she said, and saw you go down, and found that the idea of the next moment, the moment in which the thing that hit you again while you were down, was not something I was willing to observe. She paused. That was before I retrieved you. I felt it then. I have felt it since. She looked at him with those eyes. It has increased, he breathed. He thought about what that meant, not as a political fact, not as a strategic arrangement, but as a simple human truth about a non-human being who had, somewhere in the last 8 days, Become someone he thought about constantly, and wanted to understand completely, and found that the wanting to understand had become its own kind of answer. I feel protective of you too, he said. She was quiet. That is, she paused. I am an infinite dragon god. The concept of someone feeling protective of me is unusual, he said. I was going to say incoherent, she said. It's not incoherent, he said. It's not about power levels. It's about caring whether things go well for someone. Wanting to stand between them and the things that would diminish them. He paused. The things that would diminish you aren't the things that would diminish most people. But they exist. The loneliness. The being used. The being seen as a power source rather than a person. He looked at her. I want to stand between you and those things. She was very still. Even though I am infinite, she said. Even though you're infinite, he said. The dimensional gap moved around them. That is, she said, with the care of someone choosing exact words, the most significant thing anyone has said to me. In all of my existence. He looked at her. I mean it, he said. I know, she said. That is why it is significant. They trained in the afternoon with a different quality to it. The register work had reached a point where conversation between them and it was beginning to approach fluency. Not perfect fluency. Because fluency in the Dragon Register took longer than 10 days, but functional fluency, the kind where the important things could be transmitted cleanly, and the nuances arrived in layers. He could feel her meanings more fully now. She could feel his. This made the training interesting in ways that neither of them had entirely anticipated, because the register did not lie. And training with someone in a medium that did not lie meant that everything present was present, including the things that were developing between them, which were real and were registered and were not a problem, but were also not something either of them had a clean framework for yet. He transmitted something in the middle of a complex exercise. He was maintaining awareness of a large section of the gap while simultaneously communicating in the register, a two-part challenge she had introduced that morning, and what transmitted was not the exercise content alone. It included, faithfully, what he was thinking while he did the exercise, which was her, and the meeting that morning, and the things she had said about protection, and the awareness that something was building between them with the patient inevitability of an honest choice. He felt the transmission the moment it left him. He could not recall it. She received it completely. She was still for a moment. Then, in the register, she sent something back. What she sent was not words, was never words, but it translated, as closely as language could manage, to, I have been in this existence for longer than I can calculate, and I have not felt this before, and I do not have a framework for it, and I am not afraid of it. He stood in the dimensional gap and received this from the most ancient and powerful being in existence, transmitted in the only register that could not lie. He sent back, either am I. She looked at him across the training space, across the gap, across the enormous difference in what they were, and what they had been through and how long they had each existed, and what existed between them. And that look was not complicated. It was exactly as simple as Ophis's best truths. Something real, something chosen, something neither of them was arguing with. Continue the exercise, she said out loud, with the quality of someone restoring a surface structure over something that had just become very clear beneath it. Right, he said. He continued the exercise. But the register, which did not lie, continued to carry what it carried, between both of them, back and forth, in the honest language beneath language, and the gap received all of it, and held it, and moved around them with the slow patience of something that had been waiting, for a very long time, for exactly this. That evening, their evening, the one they had built together out of internal clocks and shared habits, he made tea. She sat in her way near him. They drank average tea in the silence that was no longer only silence. Ophis, he said. Yes. What happens next? He asked. Not politically. Not with the training. He looked at her. What happens with this? She held her teacup with both hands, attending to it fully. I do not know, she said. I have no framework for it. I have no precedent. She paused. I find that I do not find this distressing. Usually the absence of a framework is uncomfortable for me. I prefer categories. I prefer precision. She looked at him. But this refuses to be filed, and I find that I do not want to file it. I want to let it be what it is and find out what it is as it becomes it. He looked at her. That's the most human thing you've said, he said. Is that good? She asked. It's very good, he said. She considered this. Then, she said, what happens next is that we find out. Together. She paused. That is sufficient, as a framework. That is completely sufficient, he said. The gap held them, vast, ancient, full of the silence that was no longer only silence. And the tea was average, and the evening was theirs, and the thing that was building between them built quietly and without arguing with itself. Outside in the gap, in the space that was most privately hers and was now, in some increment too small for most instruments to measure, also something shared. The darkness moved with the patient quality of something that has been waiting for something real and has, at last, found it.